Spirit, we ask that all that we learn, you give us the enablement to put them to practice in the name of Jesus.
Amen.
As to be here today, we ask that your Spirit will bring them and that they will not go back the same way they came in the name of Jesus. Amen. Thank you. Lord, we are grateful. In Jesus' name.
Amen.
Auntie Stella, over to you, please, for the opening charge.
All right, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for being here right on time. Thank you to our first speaker. She's been here since over 10 minutes. Thank you so much, Ma, for being here right on time. Thank you to everyone who is here. The Lord bless you. Thank you for coming to How We Do It July edition. The Lord bless you. It shows the importance and value you place on learning and knowledge about best ways to answer questions, especially the tough questions our children are asked. Once again, permit me to say as we start that our children and our teenagers are asking questions. Now, the question to you and I is, who are they asking? They are not asking you for the information they need to get from you. Then who are they asking? There's content everywhere. Who is putting context to the content our children are consuming? Who is putting context to the content that is flying everywhere and our children are consuming? If they are not asking you, if you're not having conversation with them, so who are they conversing with? What are they doing with the plenty content they are getting? Today we are looking at mental health. While preparing for today, the only Bible verse that came to me, and I said it's a good thing I share here. Please, if you have your Bibles with you, please quickly open to Jeremiah chapter 35, verse 6. Jeremiah chapter 35, verse 6. It's a popular scripture. It says, but they replied, we do not drink wine because our forefather Jonadab, son of Rechab, gave us this command. Neither you nor your descendants must ever drink wine. Let me just extend it to verse 7. It says, also, you must never build house. Sorry, 1 second.
The first 3,000. Okay. Plus 135. 17. Plus books 400. 21. Plus carrots 300. 24. Plus Irish food.
Please let's mute. I'm trying to mute somebody and it's
I'll mute. It's 200. I don't know.
All right. So when it's your turn, you can unmute and talk to us. All right. So verse 7 says, also, you must never build houses, sow seed, or plant vineyard. You must never have any of these things, but must always live in tents. Then you will live a long time and in the land where you are nomad. We have obeyed everything our forefather, Jonadab, son of Rechab, commanded us. Neither we nor our wives nor our sons and daughters have ever drunk wine. And then it continues. So these are people who obeyed what their forefather said to them. So many of them didn't know these forefathers, right? So many of them didn't know their forefathers. But they kept this tradition and continued to obey. So the question is, how did their forefather say it to his sons? How did their forefather say to his sons that the voice of their father never left them? And then they kept obeying and transferring this tradition or culture or value to their descendants. That was the question that came to my mind. And I'm also asking it to you. When your children remember you, when your children think of you, when you are not there and your voice pops up in your children's mind, what do they hear? What will your child say? My father told me this. My mother taught me this. Oh, I remember in this conversation that my mother said or my father said, and they decide to live with that because you, the father, you, the mother, is or was an informed parent, and you gave them the right, the appropriate information. I want to say it again. Our children need conversations. Our children need to talk to us. Enough of going to talk to strangers, the things they should be telling us. Enough of hearing the wrong voices and believing it. Our duty is to answer their questions. And in the cases where you cannot answer, send them to the right channels where their questions will be answered. That's my charge this evening. We need to begin to answer. Today we're talking about mental health. Somebody saw it and said, God forbid. God forbid, though. God doesn't forbid, though. This is reality. And then moreover, God forbid, not my portion. It's not a strategy. We need to be informed. We need to know. And that's why we're here today. I want to say a special thank you to all our speakers. I can also see that Uncle David Folaremi is here. So thank you very much, sir, for coming, for being here on time, despite your tight schedule. I want to say thank you to all of our speakers for agreeing to come and spend this time with us to inform us. They are all professionals. All professionals. And I want to tell us, please listen. If you have your friends, please take that link and share it so that they just hook up and come and learn. Our teenagers, our young adults are having a lot of issues. We even need to know when it is healthy, when they are okay. And that's why we are here today. I trust God that we will learn, we will understand, and yes, we'll be better off that we came today. So once again, thank you so, so much for being here. The Lord bless you. Over to you, Sister Gift.
God bless you, ma. Thank you for being right on time. We are so grateful to everyone. Thank you, Auntie Stella, for that charge. Knowledge is power. Knowledge is still power. Today, we are going to be yet empowered on mental health. And moving right straight to our program, we have our first speaker. Our first guys, we're going to be dealing with the topic, how to know when your word needs help. And our first speaker is Dr. Chika Aineto. Before she comes on, please just permit me to read her profile, her profile. Dr. Chika Aineto is a consultant family physician and a certified cognitive behavior therapist. She's a member of the Academy of Cognitive Therapy in Pennsylvania, USA, and a Beck Institute certified CBT clinician. She's also a fellow of the West African College of Physicians and a member of the Society of Family Physicians of Nigeria. She loves God and she's passionate about helping people achieve wellness through cognitive behavioral therapy and holistic biopsychosocial care. She's married with 3 children and is the MD of Sunshine Family Medical and Psychotherapy Clinic in DIF Medical Center at Gudu. Please join me welcome Dr. Chika Aineto. Dr. Chika, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. Oh, it's so dark where I am. Let me move towards the lens a bit. Okay. Is it better now? Okay. Good evening, everyone.
Good
Thank
evening.
you for having me. I'm really delighted to be here. Should I go straight ahead into the presentation?
You go ahead, ma'am. Thank you for.
Okay, I wanted to share my screen because I have a presentation I want us to look at. Okay, saying host disabled participant screen sharing. Can you enable that? Stella, can you hear me? Stella?
I'm trying to check the setting. I don't know why it's showing that. I'm trying to check the setting to know why you can't.
You can hear
can
me.
now. You can try again, ma'am.
Okay. All right.
Hey guys, JQ sound. Next time you have done. Not why you
Who did something?
I'll write you what you do something.
Okay, great. All right, good evening, everyone. I'm going to be talking about how to know when your ward needs help. Once again, thank you for having me. So I'll be talking, well, the objective of this presentation is for us to understand what mental health is. So when we're saying when our ward needs help, we mean like who our ward has symptoms and signs of mental illness or an actual mental health disorder. I'm going to focus a lot on how to prevent it and what to do if it has already occurred. So I'll be talking along these lines. I'll start with an introduction. I'll talk about how common mental illness is in childhood and adolescence. I'll talk about the causes and risk factors. Then I'll talk about the developmental tasks and needs of our children and adolescents. I'll talk about how to actually know, identify the telltale signs of mental illness or the signs that it's about to happen, and most importantly, how to prevent it from happening and what to do before I conclude. So by way of introduction, when we talk about the ward, we mean like your child or your relation, anyone under your care or guardianship. So when we say needing help, it means being at risk for mental illness or showing signs of an actual mental health disorder. I want to introduce these terms in case we're not too familiar with it. I mean, Generation Z, because we're going to be talking about our children and adolescents. So Generation Z are people born between the years 1996 to 2012 and upwards. Then the millennials are those born from 1981 to 1996. Generation X is those born between 1965 and 1980. The importance of this we shall find out pretty soon. So what is mental health illness? What is mental illness? Mental illnesses are health conditions that involve changes in how we feel, our emotions, and how we think, and how we behave. Before it is called a mental health disorder, it has to affect our function. In other words, it has to affect us in the way we live, in our work, our family, social relationships. If we have emotional difficulties or issues, or our perspective is different and it doesn't affect our function, our social relationships or our work, then it doesn't meet criteria to be called a mental health disorder. Examples of mental illnesses, like mental health disorders, are mood disorders like depression, mania, bipolar, anxiety disorders, psychotic disorders like schizophrenia, personality disorders, and eating disorders. So this is just by way of to make us understand what we mean by these mental health disorders. So I want to state clearly that mental illness, even though there's a lot of stigma associated with it, it's really nothing to be ashamed of. It's a medical problem, medical condition, just like heart disease, just like hypertension, just like asthma, sickle cell disease, and nothing to be ashamed of. I was talking to a patient of mine who had a substance use disorder problem. And, there's always this tendency of, okay, it's my fault. This is all me. Yes, this patient might have made a bad choice and, maybe has, gone with wrong friends and made a bad decision. But we now know for a fact that there are predisposing factors. There are genetic differences in the brains of those who are more prone to have substance use disorders than other people. So just to compare it with something like hypertension. Hypertension is a non-communicable disease. What that means is it's caused by our wrong choices as well. So, I'm trying to say that mental illness is nothing to be ashamed of, that it's just like hypertension. So in hypertension, people might eat fatty foods, salty foods, not exercise, gain weight, have a family history or predisposition. The same thing with substance use disorders. People have a predisposition, they have something about their brains. I don't want to go into details because that's not the topic of today, but I just want to mention that just the way hypertensive people have predispositions, so do people with substance use disorders. They make bad choices, those with hypertension. Those with substance use disorders also make bad choices. So I just want to emphasize this statement that mental illness is really nothing to be ashamed of. It's a medical problem like heart disease, hypertension, etc. How common is it really? Like Mrs. Stella was saying when she introduced, and someone would say mental illness, you say, God forbid. Is it really common in Nigeria, in Africa? The truth, unfortunately, is yes, it is. There is a McKinsey Health Institute, which is a non-governmental organization in the US, and they did a global survey in 2022, just last year, and they found out across generations that Generation Z, that is our children, born between 1996 and 2012, are at a higher risk of having mental illnesses compared to other generations. That's compared to our generation, compared to our father's generation. This Generation Z, they have a 1 in 4 chance of having a decline in their mental health compared to those that are in our generation or even older generation. But generally speaking, according to a global survey that was done in 2019, just before the pandemic broke out, it found out that among countries, including Nigeria, the global survey found out that there's a general worldwide increase in mental illness. So it's definitely something that we should be paying attention to from a parent's perspective. So this is just to buttress my point that compared to other Generation Z is at an increased risk of mental illness. If we look at this histogram, this chart, you see that the ones in the bar in very light blue, these are those born between 1996 and 2012. And this is when they were compared to other generations, millennials, Generation X, and baby bloomers. Baby bloomers are those born before 1965. And we found out that on all counts, mental health, social health, spiritual health, we found out that Generation Z are more likely to have these difficulties, or they've self-reported having more difficulties in these areas than other members of other generations. The question is, why is this so? Perhaps the social media, perhaps the internet has something to do with it. The truth is, according to this study that was done last year, they are not quite sure why this is so, but it's definitely something we should be all paying attention to. It may be because they have increased awareness, increased exposure to social media. They were born with the internet and with gadgets and all sorts of, electronic gadgets that can connect the world. Or maybe they have an increased awareness to mental health illness. I was curious to find out what was the situation with Nigeria. And I found out that, let me just go back. I found out that in this study that they did in so many countries, Nigeria inclusive, they found out that our own youths, our children that belong to Generation Z, they had difficulty more in their social health, not necessarily in their mental health. Social health has to do with your meaningful relationships, how you're able to connect with others. So the emphasis here for me is that if you have difficulty in your social health in relating to people, it's a matter of time before you have difficulty in your mental health as well. So about how common it is, 1 in 10 children have a clinically diagnosed mental health problem, that is, have a mental health disorder, that is 10%. And the sad story is that 70% of these children never really get appropriate intervention. What is the commonest mental health disorder amongst these children? Anxiety disorders, especially things like social anxiety disorder, panic disorder, generalized anxiety disorder. OCD stands for obsessive compulsive disorder. Depression, behavioral disorders, suicide. The suicide rate in Nigeria is 17.3 out of 100,000. And this is actually the highest in Africa. And when I dug further to find out why these young people committed suicide, I found out that 30.1% of them within the ages of 18 to 21, the commonest reason was relationship difficulties. This is almost emphasizing the graph I showed us earlier, that the people from Nigerian children, Nigerian adolescents and youths, in this self-report survey that was done last year, they reported having most of their difficulties in their social health. And we know for a fact that social health influences mental health. What are the things that cause these mental health illnesses? What are the risk factors? Actually, it's multifactorial. So many things, combine together to precipitate these disorders. Genetics and family history. Bipolar disorder is one of the mental health illnesses that has the strongest genetic link, meaning if you have a mother with bipolar or a grandmother with bipolar, your risk of having bipolar yourself is high. So it's a risk. It doesn't mean that you must have bipolar disorder, but it's a risk. Environment, negative experiences from growing up influence core beliefs. From a psychotherapist perspective, a core belief is a basic way you see yourself and the world. So the things these children go through, while they're growing up in their nuclear family, influences how they see themselves. And when they see themselves poorly and have ideas or core beliefs like, I'm not good enough, I'm not as good as other people, I'm not beautiful enough, I'm not attractive enough, then this is one predisposing factor to mental health illnesses like depression. Parenting style. So we're parents here. Parents, we inadvertently model unhelpful behavior. In practice, from experience, most of my patients that have anxiety disorders will have a mother who worries a lot, or a parent who worries a lot, or someone, a significant caregiver while they were growing up, who has the tendency to overshelter. I saw one a few days ago, and she gave me her family history, and she was telling me that her mother would not allow them to play unsupervised. And that makes sense. Don't get me wrong. That makes sense. But this continued even in her adolescence. Her mother would have someone stay with them and watch them, when they're playing, just to make sure they didn't get hurt. So the mother had good intentions, but inadvertently, what she was teaching her children was, you can't take care of yourself. The world is dangerous. The world isn't safe. So this now translated into children who were warriors themselves and had increased risk of generalized anxiety. Overly high expectation of children and teens. Since most of us here are parents, if not all of us, a lot of patients I see in my clinic, the result or the crux of the matter, at the foundation of their problem, is parents wanting them to abide by all their overly high expectations, and the child feeling compelled to adjust themselves to meet the parents' expectations. There's nothing wrong with having great expectations for our children, but the problem is when we fail to recognize that the child has his or our own, strengths and talents, and we want to impose our own life or our own expectations on them, not bothering to explore their own talents and gifts. Trauma, typically, from childhood, from adolescent, physical, verbal, emotional, and sexual. Some of the patients I've been in contact with have told me stories of not just sexual abuse, but emotional abuse from unstructured families where there is no consistent discipline, there is, no structure, no one to put order in the family. So these are things that increase risk. Substance abuse, cannabis, that is marijuana, that's Indian hemp. A lot of people feel like this drug, or say that this drug has its uses, and it does. There is medical marijuana, for instance, but it's been proven that cannabis, that is Indian hemp or marijuana, increases the risk of apathy or causes apathy. Apathy means when you are not motivated to do anything. And in some people, a small subset, it actually can trigger psychosis. That is when you actually have a type of mental health disorder where you lose touch with reality and begin to hear voices and respond to those voices in your head that do not actually exist, and maybe even see people that do not actually exist. Social stress. We talked about Generation Z children and adolescents being at an increased risk or reporting, increased mental issues, mental health issues compared to other generations. Perhaps social stress has something to do with it. Cyberbullying or even bullying in person. We know for a fact that research has shown that children who were bullied while growing up have an increased risk of mental health disorders as adolescents, as adults. Dysfunctional home environment, lack of structure, and sometimes we don't know. Idiopathic means we don't really know why these things happen. Other risk factors are chronic illnesses. People with sickle cell disease, for instance, because of the chronic pain they have to undergo when they have a crisis, they have a higher risk of having depression and even substance use disorders when they tend to misuse their pain relief medications. Cultural or societal expectations. Going back to our Generation Z youths, the thing about internet is that having more than 2 hours of screen time, for instance, makes young people feel like they're missing out, that they're not quite where they should be, and maybe their body image, especially females, is not what it should be. Maybe they don't feel beautiful. And these things are things that increase the risk of mental health illness. Developmental disabilities, they're children who are, because of some illness growing up, some inborn errors of metabolism. What that means is just like genetic illnesses that were not detected while they were growing up. They have difficulties with learning. They have difficulty reading, difficulty understanding written words, difficulty calculating things, mathematics. Then intellectual disabilities like people with Down syndrome who are born with problem genetically have an increased risk of mental health illness. I brought this slide, I included this slide because I feel it's important for us to know the developmental tasks that these young people are supposed to achieve at different times and the psychological needs so that we as parents can do our best to meet these needs. So starting from infancy, it's a fact that from infancy, at that time of life, that is when the brain is most significantly affected by the external environment more than at any other stage in life. External environment meaning the kind of parenting they receive, whether it's a parenting that is responsive, whether it's a parenting that is absent or not. So at this tender age of our infants, neuronal pathways are being formed. And if through absence or poverty or depression, maybe the mother has postpartum depression, now known as peripartum depression, these children infants do not get the kind of responsive love and care to strengthen the emotional bond and attachment between them and their mothers. Neuronal pathway, that is, nerves in their brain are forged in such a way that they're more likely to have problems later in life. There's something called ADHD. ADHD means attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, where children find it difficult to pay attention in class, not because they're not intelligent, they struggle academically in secondary school and university, not because they're not intelligent, but because they're unable to focus their minds on what their teachers are saying. Hyperactivity when they're unable to keep still. So these are the things right from infancy that increase the risk of these things later in life. So what the infant needs is a secure, warm, responsive, and predictable relationship. That means that if the infant should cry, there is a trust and a confidence that someone, primary caregiver, typically the mother, would come running to feed or change a diaper or whatever needs to be done. So the needs of an infant is security, stability, and sensitivity. Security, I know that we have insecurity problems in the country. I mean more of emotional security. That if the infant cries, there will be someone to hold and, play with or feed. Stability in terms of, the same caregiver. Sensitivity in terms of response to their needs. So when this is available, the infant is more likely to have a secure attachment, which has importance and significance even later in life, even into adulthood. So this slide just shows the developmental task of the child, and then later I'll talk about the developmental tasks and the psychological needs of the adolescent. So toddlers, typically between 1 to 3 years of age, at that age, they're trying to explore the environment, to understand the environment. They feel pride when they're good and embarrassment when they're bad. Or, they've been disciplined. by 15 months of age, they're able to recognize that other people are going through things, and they're able to have empathy, and they become their emotionally attached objects and their toys and teddy bears and all that. So the need of our children at this age is unconditional love, acceptance, rewarding good behavior, and not necessarily when we're disciplining. So discipline is important, but what I want to bring out here is that we as parents should do our best to discipline, mete out discipline that corrects behavior and does not attack the character of the child. So safe and structured and predictable environments, being supportive and encouraging, avoiding sarcasm and lies. Preschoolers between the age of 3 to 5. Now, this is when self-esteem begins to form. So we know that with depression, there's a reduced self-esteem. So you see that even as a child, you as a parent have a role to play in building your child's self-esteem. Self-esteem at this age is based mostly on what others tell him or her. So when we, because we're angry, we run our kids down, we speak badly to them, we are unknowingly hurting their self-esteem. Now, it's not that you should not discipline, like I said. We should correct, criticize the behavior, but not preserve the character or the spirit of the child. So things like, this is wrong, don't do that, versus you're an idiot, you're a fool, things like that. Then at the school age, 6 to 12 years, self-esteem is now based on ability to perform in school. So again, from the parental perspective, to prevent, reduced self-esteem by the time the child is an adolescent. And we know from research that compared to other developmental stages, the self-esteem of adolescents dips, and it's understandable because this is the age where they are, there are crossroads between who am I, who do I want to be, independence versus dependent on their parents, and self-identity and all that. So to help your children between 6 to 12 years and older to develop a good or strong self-esteem. So since self-esteem at this age is based on ability to perform, it is up to us as parents to identify the things these children are good at and encourage them to do it. So when they do these things and they excel, their self-esteem increases. And at this age, they're also sensitive to other people's opinion of them. So going back to what we say to them, curious about their body. So this is the time for education, monitoring screen time, because education and content is all over the place. But we as their parents, we know better, and we can actually educate them and not be shy about talking about things like sex and puberty and things like that. So developmental tasks and needs of the adolescents. Adolescents are known for the push for independence. Suddenly your lovely, child now wants to be more with friends than you, defining one's identity. I stumbled across a study where that had to do with people who later identified as being in the wrong body, being either gay or queer or bisexual. And when this happened, when this developed, was around early and late adolescence. This is the time when one's identity begins to form. So the group, the social group that your children, identify with at this time is crucial. So as parents, we should know our children's friends. And at this time, begin to, if you're, as a child of God, use spirituality also to buffer some of these things that we teach our children. So the need of this child is for good health hygiene, good health habits, athletics, education, anticipatory guidance when it comes to physical growth. So anticipatory, you don't wait until they enter puberty. You start from before puberty happens to begin to explain to them the changes that their bodies will go through, the changes that they might go through emotionally, psychologically, and even sexually. Other things parents can do to meet these needs of our children is to, teach conflict resolution. So there will always be, if you have more than one child, there will always be conflicts between them. There will always be quarreling. So apart from resolving these conflicts themselves, what we as parents could also do is to teach these children how to resolve their own conflicts and actually teach them step by step how to talk to one another, how to negotiate, get what they want without necessarily depriving the other of what they want. So teaching them to control their impulses, because at this age, there are a lot of hormones during puberty. And Another thing I want to emphasize at this stage, now this is talking about middle adolescent, between 15 to 17 years. This is the age where the chances or the risk of substance abuse, is high. So those that will abuse substances, especially boys, it occurs, or the tendency is really high between the ages of 15 to 21, middle and late adolescence. So this is when we as parents also should, try to negate this or ameliorate this by giving education and giving anticipatory guidance and monitoring, especially at this time, driving safety, protected sex, and abstinence. Finally, what are the telltale signs? How do you know when your ward actually needs help? When there is maybe a hidden mental health illness, or maybe not a disorder, maybe the child is going, or adolescent is going towards having one. So there are certain red flags. So look out for their moods. So we know that the typical adolescent will have mood swings, especially the females. Today they're happy, tomorrow they're not happy. Today they're angry, tomorrow they're not. So the key here is persistent. When it happens on more days than not, persistently, continuously, for about 2 weeks, then you should be worried. When they lose interest in what they were really interested in before. Maybe your son loved to play basketball, and suddenly he's in his room. Why won't you play basketball? He's not interested. Reduced motivation, low enthusiasm to do things they love to do before. Maybe they love to eat. Suddenly they've lost their appetite, or they're not eating, as well as they used to. Reduced energy, persistent fatigue. Apathy means no energy to do anything. Nothing is interesting to them. So again, remember when we're talking about the risk factors for mental illness, and I said cannabis use, marijuana use causes something called amotivational syndrome, where the person doesn't have any motivation. So apathy is a telltale sign not only of depression or mood disorder, but even of substance use. Reduced concentration. I spoke about ADHD. There's attention deficit type and then the hyperactivity type. Reduced concentration, it also occurs in depression and also in anxiety. Poor sleep, not sleeping as well as they used to, waking up earlier than they want to, or sleeping too much. These are telltale signs. So these things have to happen persistently before it becomes a problem, something for you to worry about. Someone not sleeping, once or twice a week is not a telltale sign of a mental health illness. Other telltale signs are reduced appetite, increased appetite. You can go both ways, again, persistently for about 2 weeks, talking about criteria for depression, inadvertent weight loss. So the child is not, losing weight. So telltale sign of substance use, telltale sign of mood disorders like depression, hopelessness. How can you tell that your child or your adolescent is hopeless? By the things they say. So this means, I'm indirectly saying you need to know your child or adolescent. You need to spend time, because you won't be able to tell someone who is hopeless if you're not spending time with them. So from the way they say, how their speech is catastrophic, they tend to think of the worst case scenario all the time. And, it just shows from how they behave and what they say that there's hopelessness. That actually is a big red flag. In fact, it's an indicator of an increased risk for suicide. We talked about the suicide rate among our children being as high as 17.3 per 100,000, which is high, and the highest in Africa. Irritability means easily angry, easily frustrated. Again, this is when it's persistent. Not, anyone can get easily angered or easily annoyed. When it's persistent for months and months, then you know that this is a problem. Restlessness, inability to relax, social withdrawal, always wanting to be inside, not wanting to talk to friends, not wanting to talk to anyone, feeling worthlessness. Again, you would know by the way they, the things they say and how they behave. Suicidal thoughts, talking a lot about death and how good it would be not to be here, things like that. Self-harm behavior. Our young people, can actually engage in self-harm behavior when the pain, the emotional pain from these mental health disorders, especially depression or even anxiety, become so intolerable that to feel physical pain is preferred to this emotional pain. They can actually begin to cut themselves and harm themselves to get relief from the intensity of the emotional pain that they feel. Disorganized behavior, irrational thought and speech, and hallucinations. This is more when people have, psychotic disorders. Psychotic disorders are disorders where mental health disorders where the person has actually lost touch with reality. and it's almost like living in a world in their minds, or what they see is not what is real. Abnormal eating pattern. Some children develop eating disorders where they would eat so much and then look for a way to, either use a laxative, purgative, and have diarrhea, or cause themselves to vomit, or not eat because they feel they're fat, but you are looking at them and they're slimming down before your eyes. These are eating disorders. Pervasive difficulty with relationships. Now, this is talking about personality disorders. Personality disorder is when someone's personality and how they are, how they behave, how they see things is not helpful, and has been like that throughout their lives, and affects every area of their lives. One telltale sign of this is difficulty in your relationships, be it at work, be it at school, be it in the family. Difficulties, a telltale sign of personality disorders. So finally, what can we do as parents, as caregivers, to prevent this from happening? So I spoke about right from infancy, providing security, stability, and sensitivity. So if we do what we can within what lies within us, we know that our country is insecure. God is our protector. To ensure a secure, warm, responsive, and predictable home environment, this is one way we can prevent these things from happening. But to do that, for our ward, we need to take care of ourselves. There's so many issues and problems in our country today. We don't even want to start talking about it, because we'll spend the whole day talking about the problems of our country. So we parents need to bring out time to take care of ourselves, so that we would have the resources to look out for our loved ones. Communication with spouse. If parents, husband and wife, are united through communication in their values and discipline, it's actually a lot easier to provide the secure, warm, and responsive and predictable home environment for our children, which can protect them against the chances of having mental illness. Spend time getting to know them, asking about their day, because it is through spending time to get to know them that you get to find out if they're feeling hopeless, or feeling worthless, or feeling ashamed, or having any kind of difficulties in school. For instance, discipline combined with love. So I've talked about discipline, how we should discipline the behavior, correct the behavior, and make sure we do not hurt the spirit by abusing and verbally abusing these children. Being consistent and giving age-appropriate discipline, adjusting your expectations. I keep going back to these expectations because of what I've seen in practice. A lot of young people live their whole life trying to meet up to the expectations of their parents, that they lose sight of who they really are. And then they get to a point, usually late adolescent, by the time they're 18, 20, 21, 22, even 23, they find out that, all of a sudden they've done all these things to meet the parental expectations, and they don't know who they are. They don't know what their values are. And maybe they're not even happy with the kind of life that we, the parents, have encouraged them to live, because we're trying to kind of live our lives through them. Then here I've also written open communication, regardless of the offense committed. So we should do as much as we can, never to, bridge or keep away our children from us because they are not, doing what we want them to do, so we don't talk to them. No, we should do our best to ensure that communication is always going on two ways, and we always give the impression that we are available to listen and to take care of them. Another way we can prevent mental health illness is to communicate through our words and actions that will always be there, regardless of their behavior. Because if we communicate by our words and our actions that unless you are good, you can't relate with me, unless you get excellent grades, you're not a good boy or a good girl, then, we are pushing them away. But we have to find a way to communicate through our behavior that no matter what happens, you can count on me to help you. Then another thing I've found recurrently over and over again in practice is when parents do not adequately communicate their stance on issues in a way that our children or adolescents understand. I'll paint a picture real quick. So there is a young person, early 20s, who had the idea that he was not lovable. And when we dug a bit deeper, the reason, one instance he gave for feeling this way was something that happened when he was really young. So when he was growing up, there are two of them. His mother had him, the older one, and then his younger sister. So they lived in a one-bedroom apartment, and sorry, 2 bedrooms. So the parents had one room, and then it was which child would get the spare room and which child would have to sleep on the couch in the parlor, in the living room. So now this young man at that time was an exemplary young boy. He was, good in class. He had good grades. He was obedient. But his sister, on the other hand, was more rascally. That's his younger sister. So he expected, being the older son, that he would have the room, and he was a good boy. But to his amazement, his mother, his parents gave his sister the room. So that's to him. And now remember, this young man, this is a young man now, and this is something that happened when he was growing up. That in his mind was an example or an evidence that he was not lovable. So unfortunately, at the time of this session, his parents had passed on. So we couldn't ask, why was this, what happened? Luckily for us, an aunt was still alive. And when we presented the situation, what could have been the reason, do you think? Because the aunt, was very close to his parents. And she said, oh, no. It wasn't because he wasn't lovable. It was because he was dependable and he was a good boy, that they had him sleep in the sofa, so that in case his wayward sister tried to sneak out in the night, he would, catch her. So what brought me into the story was explaining stance on issues in a way that the child or the adolescent can understand. Maybe the parents in some way did not explain their reason for doing what they did. So, and left this young boy at that age, free to conclude whatever he chose to conclude. And unfortunately, his conclusion was he was not loved, maybe as much as the girl was, or maybe not even loved at all. Then I put here, do not live your life through your child. We talked about expectations, being careful to promote or encourage your child's strengths versus fostering your own expectation on the child. Another way we can prevent mental health illness is by knowing the kids' friends and targeting our education to their developmental stage. So I talked about substance abuse happening early and late adolescent, that is the time we should begin to talk to our young people about drugs and the consequences of it, and then talking about puberty before it starts in pre-adolescent. Spirituality is crucial. A lot of patients I've met who have wanted to harm themselves. One of the reasons they didn't was fear of hell, and not even love of parents, not even what society would say, fear of hell. So, of course, we want to promote the love of God, but I'm just saying that spirituality definitely has a role in preventing mental health illness. So what can we do? Supposing you have a child or a ward that already has a mental illness, maybe you've taken to the doctor or the psychiatrist has seen, or the doctor has seen and said, this is this, what can you do? Or you're suspecting that maybe these signs I've mentioned, you have a child or a ward that has it. Well, the first thing to do is be observant. Don't assume. Observe. A lot of the telltale signs I mentioned, are things that happen persistently. So someone being irritable today once or twice, or being moody does not equal a mental health disorder. So communication, again, is key. Do your best to see if you can get into the minds of these people. If you can create a relationship where you're approachable to talk about these things, and don't be afraid to talk about very sensitive issues like sex, identity, independence, things like that. Most importantly, once you've noticed what you've noticed, you've tried to communicate, get help. There are mental health experts here in Nigeria who are trained to help these people. These things are treatable. It's not something that has to be there forever. There are things that psychotherapists, psychologists, by medications, by talk therapy that will help to treat these young people and get them out of this disorder. So by way of conclusion, I'll end by saying that mental illness in children and adolescents is real. I mentioned earlier that in 1 out of 10 of our children and adolescents will have a mental health disorder. It can significantly adversely affect our lives, our own lives as their parents who love them. their relationships, their lives, their future, and then society at large, because family is the bedrock of society. Definitely disrupts families and relationships, can be prevented to an extent, can definitely be treated, medications and talk therapy. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chika. Thank you so much, Etuma. We're indeed so grateful. I believe all the people on our platform have gained a lot, not one thing, a lot. For me, one take home is know your children so that you identify when these signs begin to show up. Thank you so much, Dr. Chika. I believe we'll get your slides afterwards.
Yes, no problem. Yes, no problem.
Yes,
so I'll just stop my video. If there are any questions, and I can put it back up to answer them.
Yes, ma'am. So please, if you have your questions, I believe many of us are writing. If you have your questions or you have challenges that you want her to respond to, please, you can write those questions on the chat box, or you can write it out and you'll be given an opportunity to read out your questions. Thank you so much, Dr. Chika. We are really grateful. And immediately we'll be going to our next speaker. We'll be going to our next speaker so that we don't take so much of our time today. Our next speaker is no new person to the platform. He always comes with so much value every time we have him, in the person of Mr. Folaremi, Mr. David Folaremi. Before he steps in, kindly allow me to read his profile. Mr. David Folaremi is an economist and a public servant, but his interest lies in mental health and behavioral changes with emphasis on addiction. He is a trained UNODC educator and has further training with World Health Organization, EU, Colombo Drugs Advisory Program, DAP, Substance Use Disorder Prevention and Treatment Care. Mr. Folaremi has been invited by NDLA on series of occasions to speak on his past struggle with substance abuse, his recovery process and work. And the work he's doing is now to help others struggling with addiction. The most recent of his invitation was at an event organized by the NDLEA to commemorate the June 26th International Day Against Drug Abuse and Illicit Trafficking, which held at the Presidential Villa on 27th of June, 2023, I guess. David Folaremi is the project director of Live Free Initiative, which an arm of the David Folaremi Foundation that seeks to prevent substance use among the youth in the society through sensitization, enlightenment, and education. Mr. Folaremi is the executive director of the Live Free Renewal Center, a drug and alcohol rehabilitation center in Enugu State, a recipient of several awards home and abroad for his contribution to the eradication of drug abuse in Nigeria. Mr. Folaremi is a member of the International Society of Substance Use Professionals, ISUP, Nigeria Chapter, Community Prevention Network for Drugs, SIND, Nigerian Chapter, Association of Advocates Against Alcohol in Nigeria, ASAN. He is an ambassador for the drug-free world in Nigeria. Mr. Folaremi is happily married and the union is blessed with 2 beautiful daughters. Please kindly permit me to call Mr. Folaremi David to take us on.
Okay, good evening, everybody. I hope I
sir.
can be heard loud and clear. Thank you very much to a sister, a friend, a mentor, and a role model to me, Auntie Stella, for giving me the privilege to be here today to share out of my very little experience on substance abuse and its effects on adolescents and young adults. Before I go into the very brief teaching for today, I'd like to thank our previous speaker for such an enlightening, educative, and informative session. I was jotting down all through when she was speaking. And then, she's a therapist, I think. It was almost as if it was therapeutic. When she was talking, I was enjoying it, and I could see myself like I was drifting away, but at the same time, enjoying what she was saying and learning so much. So thank you very much, Ma, for such a well detailed paper on mental health and young people. Thank you very much. Today we're talking about substance use on adolescents, among adolescents and adults. Part of what Auntie Stella might have not said is that I struggled with substance use for 7 years. And because of the very limited time I have to say what I have to say today, I might not be able to go into everything or every detail that of that experience. It was a horrid experience, to say the least. In that process, in that journey, in that 7-year period, I lost 4 of my friends to drug use or drug-related activities. And that brings us to my first point for today. The ultimate effect or consequence of substance abuse is death. Now, I want to believe that we're all adults on this platform. I wouldn't speak to young persons and tell them this because I'm not one to use scare tactics. However, as parents, it's important that we know that at the end of the day, the ultimate consequence, which will lead to addiction, is eventually death. There are several other consequences and several other effects of substance use, which I would be going through, which I'll be speaking about. But I have just 30 minutes, so I might not be able to share my slides because I'll have to rush through so many of them, but eventually I'll be able to send it to our convener and she can share it with the group. A few months ago, I told this story very frantically, crying and saying she had a problem with her son, who was 13-year-old son. And then I began to ask what the problem was. I couldn't even hear what she was saying. Eventually, I could deduce that this was a substance use problem. So I told her I was out of my station, but I'll recommend another professional to help her with her son, who was 13 at the time. And then she said, okay. So I sent her the number of the person. And then I shared this story with my wife. About 2 or 3 weeks later, I'd gotten back to my station. And that the young boy died a day before I made that call from a drug overdose. A lot of us have been hearing the Colos mantra amongst the youth of today, talking about the drug Colorado. That was what that young boy was using at the age of 13. And then he was mixing it with other unorthodox substances, example, kerosene. And he eventually died of that challenge. And, that broke my heart because, when the first speaker was talking, and she was talking about connecting with your children and being available so that you can even know when there was a challenge, I kept on thinking to myself that this could have been avoided. This could have been nipped in the bud. Yes, he might have gone out, and because socialization doesn't stop in the family, he will go out, the children will go out, they will meet other people. That's a given. You can't stop that. But then when there's a behavioral change. As parents, we should notice that it's our statutory responsibility to notice when there's a change in the behavioral patterns of our children. You know, and once you don't do that, sometimes the consequences might be too grave to bear. And that was the case in this young boy's life. You know, so we must be observant. You know, we must watch out for these changes, because I saw in the paper somewhere that before substance use is reported, it has taken place for about almost 2 years, even before it's found out. So in that period of time, as a parent, what were you doing? How have you not noticed this? You know, once your children start to ask you certain questions, they might not come out straight and say, "Dad, Mom, I have a problem with substance use." But then they start to throw some subtle jabs and, you know, questions here and questions there. Your intuition should pick that there's a problem and have it nipped in the bud. It's also important to know that these things are everywhere. You know, so Auntie Stella was saying in the introduction about after I delivered my first, a young girl of 16. Sorry, I like to give stories in my teachings just so that I can buttress some of my points. A young girl of 16 years old walked up to me and she showed me what immediately I perceived to be cocaine. Like I said, I used drugs for 7 years, so I know these things. I looked at it and I asked her what it was, and she couldn't even tell what it was, but I could tell she was using just by the look on her face. So I put my pinky finger, I tore one of the nylon bags and I tested it, and I could tell it was very pure cocaine. And I asked her, "What did you bring this? What are you doing with this?" And she said, "No, she just brought it. There's so much of it in her father's house. So she brought it for that youth convention to see who would be interested in it so she can share with them." But then after she heard me speak and she saw the devastating effects of substance use on the person, she decided to come and give it to me because she didn't even know what to do with it. So this is the world we live in. This is our new reality. Drugs are sold on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, under several aliases. There's a story of a girl I've shared many times who will buy drugs and it was concealed in cupcakes. And sometimes her mother will be the one to pick up the delivery from the delivery man at the door, take it to her daughter's room, thinking innocently she's giving her teenage daughter lovely muffins, you know, as a treat. So we need to be abreast of what is happening so that we can even tackle it head on. My time is already going. The World Health Organization defines adolescents as individuals between the ages of 10 to 19. So you see, some of the stories I've just told, in fact, all of the stories I've just told involve adolescents in this age group. And then the youth as individuals from 15 to 24. Now, in Nigeria, let's drive this down. In Nigeria, we have, according to the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, over 30 million persons, youth between the, okay, let me not say youth, 30 million persons between the ages of 15 and 64 who abuse one substance or the other. Now, I'm just going to give you some background information, and I'm going to run through this very quickly before we go into the effects of drug abuse on the youth and the adolescents and young adults. First of all, as parents, I tell this to parents, I tell this to caregivers, I tell this to religious leaders. The first thing you must learn how to do is to listen. I think our first speaker really touched on everything. You know, she was very explicit in most of the things she has said. And then I'm just speaking some of the things she has said to buttress on that. The first thing you must do is to listen. Learn how to listen. It takes only a few minutes not to ask non-judgmental and non-confrontational questions and to understand whether a person might be suffering from a substance use problem. So we must listen first. Now, what is a drug? What is a drug? What exactly is a drug? It's a substance, legal or illegal, which when taken into the body affects the central nervous system, acts on the brain and on the spinal cord. It also alters the way a person thinks, feels, or behaves. It affects the normal functioning of the body and or the brain. And then it has the potential, of course, to prevent or cure or even enhance physical and mental welfare. Now, first of all, as parents, we must understand that it is our duty to create a non-drug culture in our homes. I tell parents who make the mistakes of leaving medication just everywhere in the house or taking medication in front of their children anyhow, that this is doing more harm than good, because as children, their minds are magneting these things and they're beginning to know that when you take certain things into the body, it changes the way you feel, to make you feel better. So once you're creating that impression on their mind, you're already setting yourself up for troubles. I have a 3-year-old daughter, and I would never even take paracetamol in her presence, because I just know that at that age, it's not the right thing to be showing to her that you can take certain substances that will make you feel better. She knows what food is, she knows what water is. So when she sees daddy taking tablets or pills, her inquisitive mind is going to be asking her, why is she doing this? And then as she grows up, curiosity is going to set in and she's going to want to start trying. And that's where drug abuse actually starts. How does a drug affect us?
I don't think so.
So like I said, it affects the way a person thinks or feels or behaves, and it affects the normal functioning of the body. At this point in time, I'd like to clarify that even alcohol is a drug. Any substance that alters the way a person thinks or feels is a drug. We have several types of drugs in Nigeria, of course, legal and illegal, but we'll concentrate on the illegal here. We have marijuana, we have that's cannabis, we have opioids, we have heroin, we have pharmaceuticals, we have cocaine, we have amphetamines, and then cough syrups. These are some of the drugs. And then here we have statistics on different numbers and how they are used. We have the prevalence of drug use in different zones. That's something else we should know as parents. Now, I went to a school to speak in Lagos. And do you know something? While we're approaching the school, this is an Ivy League school, man. They pay in millions per year. The taxi man, that's the Uber, I was inside. He said, Oga, this school, where they take drug anyhow. Now that's somebody on the outside who knows that this particular school doesn't have a great drug culture. And parents who do not bother to do their due diligence will just put their children in that school and eventually start suffering the consequence. Now, when that driver told me that, I was going to the school, of course, with an open mind. I didn't even know the school. That was the first time I was hearing about the school. So of course I was going there with an open mind. But then when he told me that, I started to think, why would this guy say a thing like that? I went there and I finished speaking. When I was done, I had a long line of children coming out to ask me questions, different questions they could not ask their parents, questions that they have asked their parents and their parents have wrongly answered them. I had a young boy who was talking to me about vaping, and electronic cigarettes. And this boy was 9. And he engaged me in a conversation about the effects or the non-effects of electronic cigarettes. Now, when we were done, I had 3 young girls who sat down differently, waiting for me to attend to them specially. So I walked up to them, what's the problem? And they sat me down. The first person said to me, sir, I've been using drugs and it's becoming a problem. And after I've heard you speak and you shared some of your experiences, I know I need help for her. I have nobody to talk to. Now, when she was saying this to me, in my mind, I assumed she was about, give or take, 15 years of age. So I'm saying, okay. And she said, started using 2 years ago. So she started narrating her story to me. And she said, 2 years ago, she stumbled on Hennessy in her father's room. Now, parents, this is another thing I'm talking about. We keep these things carelessly, and then children stumble upon them, and then they start using them, and we create a very, very massive problem. So she said she just stumbled upon the Hennessy. She had some, and immediately I interrupted her. I said, but Hennessy, because I know what Hennessy tastes like. Hennessy doesn't taste good. So how were you able to? So she said she didn't like it. But then she went to school, and then another friend told her to try, and I hope we have only adults here. If you have children, please, I think this is for only parents. So another child asked her to try crushing Panadol into the Hennessy, and it will give her a different feeling. Now, the moment she said that, all of my antennas were standing because in the years I spent in the bunk, that's the trap houses, the cocaine houses, I'd seen people crush Panadol and mix it with other drugs. And I know it has a different effect. So I'm thinking, okay, how is this young girl already talking about something this dangerous? So she said, okay, she did that and she crushed it in the Panadol, crushed the Panadol and put it in the Hennessy and she drank it. And then it was obviously different. And she said that was the first time she started having sex. And then I'm thinking, oh my God. So I now asked her directly, how old are you? And she told me she's 11. So when she was telling me this, she was 11. She said this happened 2 years ago, so she was 9. So she has gone back to school again at the age of 9. She started using Hennessy, and Panadol. She started having sex. She's now come back to school to talk to her friends about it. And her friends said, in my own house, we have cocaine. Now, that was the girl sitting next to her. So when all of this was going on, I just kept on thinking, where are the parents? Where are the parents? Where are the parents? And the girl in the center said to me, before she started using cocaine, she had started smoking marijuana. She was the oldest of them. She was 12. 12 girls were 11. The one in the middle was 12. She said when she started using marijuana, she tried to reach out to her parents to talk to them about it. But then the parents didn't even know how to go about it. So they tossed her to the school authorities. And then the counselor tried his or her best to explain to her the consequences of using drugs, but then it didn't really work. Eventually, she was caught smoking and she was expelled, which in itself is a wrong line of action. So she was expelled from that school. She was put into this new school. She had met with this new person, and then they were still being drugged. And then that led to another thing the first speaker spoke about, self-harm. These 3 girls pulled up their skirts up to their panty levels and showed me their thighs. And then my eyes just went teary because I'd never seen a thing like that. So they had lacerations. They had used razor blades to be cutting themselves. They used razor blades to be cutting themselves. And then when the blood comes out, they used a lighter, put on the fire from a lighter and burn the wound. Self-harm, that's a topic we can't even go into today. But then these are some of the things we need to know as parents that our young children are going through. And if we are none the wiser, we just keep falling and falling and falling into this deep hole. Remember, God forbid, it's not a strategy. We must gain knowledge. So let's quickly continue with our statistics. We have 1 out of 4 persons that use drugs. 1 out of 4 persons that use drugs now is a lady. So gone are the days when we say it's a man thing. It's just the guys. So I have ladies, so this doesn't concern me. No, that's very false. Like the example I gave of those 3 girls, they actually told me, the one in the middle that was expelled told me that in her former school, what they used to do was at night when their housemasters or house mistresses have gone to bed, they come down in their dormitory, form a circle, and start cutting themselves with razor blades. Self-harm, because they resent themselves, they resent their parents, they resent their life. They are unhappy with the fact that they can't even talk to anybody that can help them out of this. So they resort to self-harm. Now, self-reported problems explained as a result of drug use. Problems at home. Problems at home is one of the triggers. And then, like I always say to people, it boils down to the home. There are so many other social factors, socioeconomic factors that might lead to drug abuse. But I always say that at the end of the day, it boils down Now, why do people take drugs? It's very important. Why do people take drugs? According to the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, there is absolutely no single theory for why people take drugs. However, we have negative feelings, fear, hostility, thoughts towards drug use and drug users. I put up on my status a few days ago that hundreds of millions of dollars are spent yearly on drug abuse prevention. Programs like this, I was here last year at about this time, in July or so, speaking on drug abuse prevention, and I'm here again. So people, CSOs, individuals, networks, NGOs, the government is all doing what they can to stop drug abuse, but then why is it still prevalent? I think we all need this background information before we go to the effects. Now, part of the reasons why people take drugs, of course, new sensation, they just want to have that sensation, pleasant feeling, to feel different, to relax, for fun, curiosity, rebellion, to cope with problems and difficulties, to deal with life's problems and bad moods, boredom, to deal with mental health problems, to deal with physical pain. Now, whenever I teach, because of my faith, I am always in the church or religious settings. I like to tell people to take off their moral coats and religious hats and just come with a plain, open, scientific mind, because everything I'm teaching you is born out of research. So it's not religious, per se. Even though, like the first speaker said, and I totally agree with her, that spirituality is very important in these things. But let's have an open mind. So categories of drug use: experimental use. Now that's the stage where the young adult or the teenager is just experimenting out of curiosity. At this stage, as a parent, you should start picking it that something is off. At this stage, you start picking it that something is off. I was speaking in a church in Abuja, a church I was used to, but because I changed my base, I didn't used to go there often. So whenever I'm in town, they would invite me to come and speak to the teenagers. One of the teenagers I'd known from when she was that little had her head down. And I've told this story so many times. And I walked up to her and I said, "What's the problem?" She looked up at me, and immediately she looked up, I knew there was something off. I was 90% sure she had started using drugs. So I just tapped her at her back and I said, "Just go back to sleep." And I continued my teaching. At the end of the teaching, I spoke to one of the teachers and I said, "I need to see this girl and her parents, because I suspect she might be experimenting with drugs." So they invited the parents. The father was very unhappy that I said his daughter might be experimenting with drugs. I tried to explain to him that this was not an indictment on him. I was just trying to help the young girl. So we invited her in, and I told her I was going to do a UDT, that's a urine drug toxicology, drug test on her. And then she started crying, and I asked her what the problem was. And she said to me that's in the presence of her parents. She said 6 months ago, her father's younger brother was deported from the US. He was brought to stay with them, and he offered her marijuana. Now, he started offering her marijuana, and she took it out of curiosity, just as an experiment. But then he now started growing, and then this man started having sexual relationships with her. And then he introduced her to the drug called Retinol. That's the blue pill that is popularly known as the date rape drug. Now, his reason for doing this was he was giving her marijuana, he was sleeping with her, he was now giving her these pills to erase her memory, because Retinol is a powerful, very powerful sedative. So that would now erase the memory of what he had done to her. Now look at it. 6 months under the nose of her father. I looked at the father and I said, "This is on you, sir. This really is on you." 6 months, a 16-year-old girl is using marijuana, and you didn't notice that her eyes were bloodshot. You didn't notice that her appetite had increased. You didn't notice that at certain times her speech was slurry. So the father started crying, and everybody was very emotional. But what I'm trying to say here is, at this stage of experimentation, it's very important that we curb it, we nip it in the bud, and that's on us parents. That responsibility is ours to make sure that it's nipped in the bud at this experimentation stage. Now it graduates to recreational use. Now it's not just being experimenting anymore. They go out and hang out with friends and use a joint here, smoke a cigarette, drink. They always do it, in parties, social gatherings, etc. Then situational use. So something spurs it up, something brings it up, and then they have to use. Then intensive use, and then dependent use. So when it gets to intensive use, we're talking about addiction. What is addiction? Addiction is a chronic, relapsing brain disease characterized by the compulsive need to engage in a behavior or consume a substance, irrespective of its harmful consequences. What are the key words here? Compulsive, that's compulsion. You have to do it with or without your own permission, because your brain is now configured to make you think that you can't do without it. So now let me tell you something. As parents, please listen. If you don't take anything, take this here. Once you have not been able to nip it in the bud at the experimentation stage or the recreational stage, it has graduated to the dependent stage. That's the stage of addiction. Now you can do nothing. Look for our first speaker. Take a number and say, I have a problem. Help me. This is not the time to go to Orioke. You know Orioke? Mountain for prayer. No. This is not the time. This is not the time to hide it and say, what will my friends in church say? This is not the time to say, where have I wronged anybody? This is not the time to say, my village people have finally caught me. No, this is the time to look for professional help and licensed practitioners that can actually help your child, because it has now graduated from mere experimentation. It has graduated from prevention to treatment. And if you're not licensed to treat, you're only going to make it worse and worse. And that was the case that was the situation in my case. When my parents found out I was started using drugs 2 years into my drug use, I was actually the one that told them. They didn't know what to do, so they were kept on praying and praying and praying. Now, I'm not saying prayer doesn't work. But what I'm saying is wisdom is profitable direct. Get the person professional help, then back it up with prayer. Sorry, now I have to rush because I'm very positive that my time is up. Okay, 1 second, please. So now let's quickly look at symptoms of a person using drugs, because I talked about the lady the 16-year-old girl, the telltale signs, how they couldn't read it, etc. So let's quickly look at the symptoms of a drug user, then we'll look at the effects, and I'll wrap up there. Excuse me. So we have the subtle and not so subtle symptoms. Someone who struggles with drug use is usually secretive. He or she wants to be alone. There's a change in the dress and the appearance. There's a change in the interest and the activities. There's losing or gaining of weight. There's physically hurting people. There's rebellious or offensive behavior. We have absent-mindedness, and then avoiding the issue of drug abuse when talked about it. Now, these points I just outlined are some of the subtle and not so subtle symptoms. Please, let me sound this. Your children may exhibit some of these symptoms. It doesn't necessarily mean they are struggling with drug use. No. What it means is that you should pay attention. There is definitely a behavioral change. There is a problem. You should pay attention as parents. Now start looking out for more signs that I'm going to read out to us. So these signs now are more sure indicators that your children are using drugs, which is why parents, we just need, and Stella, 30 minutes is not enough for this. Parents, we just need more knowledge. You see, a father came into my office about a while ago, and then he kept on talking about his child, being slurry and, drowsy and all. So I told him to invite and he says he keeps searching their bags, and all of that. So I told him to invite the children to see me. So I spoke to them. When I was talking to the second son, I knew that they had codeine addiction. Something that was a depressant. So I told the father to go back to the house and check for more anything he can get in the room. So he came back to me while I was still with the kids. He came back to me with a bag of bottles of, the small size Ghana must go, filled with bags of codeine, empty bottles of codeine. So I looked at him and I said, sir, but this should be a sure indicator that they are abusing drugs. You know what the man told me? He said, no, that as a matter of fact, he didn't even know these ones were there, that he has been throwing so many bottles away, in the past, because they keep telling him that they have cough, they have cough, they have cough. What sort of cough is your child coughing that he's taking bottles of cough syrup week in, week out, and you don't suspect that there's a problem? So parents, this thing is on us. Very quickly, more fire indicators that a child is using drugs. Possession of illegal drugs in his room. Needle marks on his arms. Spending time with known drug users. Defending teen use of drugs. When you are having a conversation with your child and you're watching something that has to do with drug use, throw a question at him or her. What do you think about marijuana? Marijuana is a plant that God created. Do you think it's actually illegal? Do you think it should actually be illegal? Do you think it's a bad thing since it's a plant? And then hear what he or she has to say. Suicide attempts, the first speaker spoke about that. Repeatedly having bloodshot eyes, puffy or droopy eyelids. These are some more serious indicators of drug abuse. I talked about the causes already. It starts from the family, and then the glamorization of drug abuse. You also have to understand the risk factors as parents, the risk factors. Risk factors are those factors that control of your teenagers or your adolescents that makes them susceptible to using drugs. An example is genetics. Did you know that genetically somebody can carry addiction from the grandfather to the father to the child? Yes, these are things that we've seen time and time again. Another risk factor is mental health. Second diagnosis, corresponding mental health illness, that can also make the person start struggling with drug use. Environmental factor. Some of us as parents, we need to be knowledgeable about our environment, because a certain environment, you're more predisposed, your child is more predisposed to using drugs. Some of the malam, some of the aboki that is selling, they say they are selling different things. Some of those people are selling illegal substances, tramadol, retinol. These things are sold. The person is right on your street, and your child is telling you that some of the things we need to look out for. Sorry, I'm just trying to skip this slide so that we can go to the effects and I can close. We're talking about types of drugs. Nitrous oxide, let's just talk about that very briefly. That's the laughing gas, and that's the one NDLA is making so much noise about now, because a celebrity was videoed with nitrous oxide on the side. I've been talking about this for years, 2 or 3 years now, because this thing has been sold underground, sold in canisters for 80,000 naira. And then you have children put money together, secondary school students, to buy it, inflate a balloon with it, inhale it, and start laughing. So these are some of the things we should know. When you see your teenage child with balloons in the house, you should ask questions. He's not a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old. What is he doing with balloons when he's not a decorator? Please just give me 30 seconds and then I'll wrap this up. Effects of drugs. Like I said, the ultimate effect is death. I lost 4 friends that I know personally with drug abuse and drug-related activities. I've given you instances of a 13-year-old boy that died from an overdose. In Kuje, in Abuja, one of my mummies also told me about a young guy who I've been following up on, 15-year-old, 15. He died 2 or 3 weeks ago, also of a drug issue. So the effects of the user after the ultimate consequence, I repeat, is death, and then addiction, right, which is a mental health illness. So we have medical and physical deterioration. This is an effect to the person who is using drugs. We have personality deterioration. So the entire personality just deteriorates. The person is no more who you know he or she to be. We have the mental deterioration. Now, drug use does not affect only the person using, it spreads across to the families. I had a man tell me one day that he has 6 children. So if one of his sons who doesn't want to change, he doesn't care. And I told him, sir, this one child that you think is using substances and you're going to throw away is going to cause you more pain than you can ever imagine. There's a feeling of humiliation and guilt felt by family members, self-esteem generally low among the members of the family. The spirit of togetherness or unity is broken. There's a case of a family in Abuja I was managing early this year. Now, husband and wife have been married for 32 years. The son starts using drugs. They've gone to everywhere, gone to all the rehabs they know, paid millions of naira in rehab. The boy wasn't getting better. The father now decides that this is my only son. I have to take matters into my own hands and start using other forms of diabolic or spiritual means to get the guy help. And the wife was not having that, because she's like, no, I'm a born-again Christian. If you're going to do this, then. And that family broke up. A family that's married for 32 years because the son was using substances. So that's an effect to the family. And then we have occurrence of domestic violence, loss of money or valuables. There's also the effect to the community, increase of petty crimes, increase of drug dependence and pushing, fear of community residents. And then, of course, the effects on law enforcement. There's corruption in some law enforcement personnel, ineffective application of the law procedures, produces a bad image and credibility to police the agency. What do we do as parents? What do we do as parents? Number one, and very importantly, that, I can't put all of this in this teaching. But number one, first of all, gain knowledge. That's what you need to do. That's the place you need to play. That's the role you need to play. Gain knowledge. Then teach your children self-discipline. A child that is not disciplined in the way he eats or he coordinates himself or the way he behaves is very liable. There's a very thin line between lack of discipline and suffering drug abuse and addiction. You must pay attention to self-discipline and make sure it's imposed in your children. Number two, teach your children the place of purpose. Teach your children the place of purpose. I don't know where I was listening to. I was listening to a message today, and I heard somebody say, as parents, it is our primary responsibility to make sure we direct our children towards their God-ordained purposes. Because when a person does not know his or her purpose and is not working in it, he or she is liable to be influenced or to be carried away by pleasure. And finally, teach them social skills, life skills, relevant life skills, assertiveness. Teach your children to be assertive. Teach your children problem-solving skills. Stop solving all their problems for them. Allow them grow. Monitor situations that allow them to solve problems. And when they make errors, you can correct them. Teach them communication skills. Communication skills. Some children don't know how to communicate. And that's why when they are offered substances outside, they say, my mommy said, my daddy said, they're not firm. They don't know how to communicate no as no, and stand by it. So these are some of the things you also need to teach them. And then with that, then you could have covered your own end as parents and guardians of these children to create a resilience in them to be able to say no to drug abuse. I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I want to apologize for taking a few minutes above my time. God bless you all for listening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, sir, for that. Yes, 30 minutes can never be enough to get this information in. But this is, I call it like a taster to some of these things. You can reach out for more. Thankfully, in August, Uncle David is having a program. So everybody, go and register your children and yourself. The good thing about how he does this program, he has the one for children, he has the one for teens, and he has the one for adults. So reach out. It's called Drug Hackathon. He's been doing it for 2 years. This is his third day of doing it. I have attended, my son has attended, and will be attending again this year. There is no enough to hearing what he's saying. And that will be happening in August for just change, just find small money, 3,000. So please, let's take advantage of this. Register. I'll put in the information on the WhatsApp group and also on the YouTube group. So please, avail yourself this opportunity. He'll be taking, now he won't teach that for 30 minutes and he won't be doing that alone. Coach Ebuka will be joining him in that. Mrs. Ebiere Bolu will be there. Mrs. Tega Omogo will be joining him to push this information. So it's for kids, it's for teenagers, and it's for adults. So let's avail ourselves this opportunity. It's happening.
Mr.
Hello, Ma. You are muted. Oh, we can't hear you. You are muted. You have been muted for a while.
Sorry, everybody. So sorry. Thank you for letting me know. Thank you. So sorry. I didn't know I was just talking to myself. All right. Sorry for taking our time that long to talk and nobody was hearing me. So sorry. So I was saying that 30 minutes is not enough to get this in. Thank God, David Folaremi will be running the program for kids, for the children, for teenagers, and then for adults in August, just for 3,000 naira. So you can reach out to him. I'll put up the flyers on the group, WhatsApp group, and on our Facebook group. So please register. You can get this whole information for yourself, for your children also. You may not be able to say this very well to them, but the professionals are there to help pass this information. The second thing I said was that Dr. Chika has a clinic. She runs a clinic in Gudu if you're in Abuja and environment. So you can reach out for her services if you have a need for it. Reverend Dr. Adeke also works with the teaching hospital. If you also need his services, you're in the north in Kaduna, please reach out to him. Once again, I want to say thank you everyone for being here. Before our last speaker comes, I want to take a few announcements so that when he speaks to us, we take our questions and we go. All right, so thank you so much for coming. How we do it is our monthly webinar on ATQ, answering tough questions with children. What do we do here? We pick up topics that we think or we know parents find it difficult having conversations and answering their children's questions, and we bring it here, we bring professionals and they help us out. And thank God, God has been helping us that every month, we are able to get speakers who come talk to us. And I know that you're happy you came today. So thank you very much. ATQ is our WhatsApp community where we answer tough questions. That's our main goal. It's for parents, carers, significant adults. Join us. We're on Facebook, we're on WhatsApp, and we're on Instagram. Our Facebook group is more closely knitted than everywhere. Currently, we're handling the question that says, will you tell your child all the truth when they ask you the questions about your past that you are not very proud of? We have a question like that on the group. So if you're not with us there, I'll post the link, please join. Now, 29th, we're having our book review. One of our activities is our book reviews, 29th July. Take note of the date. And the book we are reading is Parenting Isn't for Cowards by Dr. James Dobson. Please join us, read this book, participate in our book reviews so that you can gain. Read and just come. Let's interact. All right, then. If you want to support us, this is brought free, but of course you know that it takes money to put up programs like this. If you want to support ATQ and the 360 community, please, I'll be posting the account numbers. Nothing is too small, nothing is too big. If you want to see this, keep running. Thank God that so many times our speakers come and they do not ask for funds. But then we have also had speakers who refuse to come because there was no fund attached to it. All right, but if you want us to continue having this, please, you can support us. Now, the next I want to talk about before we go is that we will be having our goal setting. Please mute. We'll be having our goal setting and vision board session for 2023-2024 session with our grade 4 to SS3 students. 360 Connect had this last year through our Star Inscription Reading Club. And then we'll be having it again this year. Please look out for more information on that. And then we'll be having the reading club also. That's Star Inscription Reading Club. We'll be having an online reading club for secondary students. It's going to be the first of our reading club, online reading club for secondary school students starting on the 1st of August. Watch out for the information on that. It's going to be just token fee of 2,000 naira. So please, we'll post the accounts. Please, you can post the money into the account and then let us know that you have paid. For your secondary school students, we read and we have our reviews regularly, and every child participates in the review. That's how we know they read. All right, once again, thank you so much for being here with us this evening. Our next How We Do It will be 20th August, and it's going to be all about back to school. What do I need to do? What school is my child supposed to attend? What am I supposed to look out for? Our next speaker and our last speaker for today is Reverend Dr. Adeke. Please permit me to read out his profile before he starts speaking. I'm going to, I don't think I can read all. I'll just pick part of his profile. It's quite detailed. So Oluwatosin Adekeye, that's Reverend Dr. Oluwatosin Adekeye, is a clinical psychologist by training, although holds a diploma in law from the Ahmadu Bello University, Zaria, and is passionate about why we do what we do, examining the dimension of human actions from the three dimensions of the person, the spirit, soul, and body. Now, he obtained his PhD from the University of Ibadan and is currently an assistant director of clinical psychology with the Ahmadu Bello University Teaching Hospital, Shika, Zaria, where he has served for over 23 years now. All right, so I want to jump. All right, so he's a member of both local and international associations, including the International Association of Positive Psychology, an ordained priest of the Diocese of Kaduna Anglican Community. His research interest recently began to board in the area of well-being, particularly for people affected by stigmatizing conditions, disability, including trauma and abuse on all spheres, particularly spiritual abuse, and the need for health and well-being for the total being. So today, we'll be talking to us about mental health, the effect of social media on our adolescents and our young adults. Please join me as we welcome Reverend Dr. Adekeye as he takes over. Thank you so much. You're welcome, sir.
I was putting it.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. We can hear you clearly, sir.
Okay. So this evening, I'll be talking to us about social media, and I hope that I can navigate around. The presentations are just all over the place. Please forgive me. Okay, so quickly. So I want to look at social media and mental health. And I want to thank the previous speakers, both speakers who have spoken earlier on about mental health in children and adolescents. And I think for that first speaker, it was like traveling back to the classroom over 30 years ago. So thank you very much for that. And for my brother, David Folarin, it's always an inspiration to listen to him share about the challenges with drug abuse, serious challenges, and the reality is dark. It's there, and but the beauty of it all is that we have a spirit that overcomes. And just to say to people out there, if you do have that kind of problem, seek help. And trust the Lord also, and know that there is He that knows about our lives even before we came. I sat down in church this morning, and suddenly it occurred to me that my first child will be 20 years old later on this week. And my mind went back to pregnancy, to her toddling years, and all the years. And I'm just grateful to God. It's not been a smooth ride, but it's been a ride that's proven that God is God. Now, as at that time, things were a little different. Today, the world has changed much more. And that's why we're talking about social media. And I like to start with something that Caroline Leaf said. A 140-character Twitter post can consume inordinate amounts of time, yet no deep thinking ensues. No true satisfaction of mind is attained. I'm starting with this because that's our reality today. Our young people are on social media, and there's an awful lot of information. Quite a lot of it is junk. And just like we're beginning to talk about our lifestyle when it comes to eating, we're not paying attention to our minds. And it was until high blood pressure, cardiac arrest, cancers began to hit the roof. Then we sat down and started running around to say, okay, what are we doing that we're doing wrong? Now we need to change our lifestyle. We need to eat well. It's the same thing that's happening here now. We're consuming all kinds of junk, and we're not paying attention to it. I hope we will pay attention before it becomes too late. Okay, so in order to start our discussion, the question that we must all have at the back of our mind is, what is well-being? What is mental health? What is social media? And I'll talk about parenting by proxy, adolescents and mind development. So what's the brain? The most important organ in our body. What's the mind? What are mindsets? Beliefs that we have about ourselves, about the world around us, about things that happen around us. How are these mindsets formed? One of the key ways that these mindsets are formed today is by social media. Somebody out there is controlling how you think. You do not know who that person is. You do not know how educated that person is. You do not know anything about him or her. And they're spewing out a lot of bile, and our children can't navigate through it. They're just consuming. What is mental health and well-being? And we've talked a lot about that previously. What determines mental health? Social, economic, and environmental. Okay, so I'm going to jump around a little because a lot of these things have been spoken about already. But one thing we must know is that your mind goes, where your mind goes, your life will follow. And if you forget anything from this presentation this evening, it's to remember that where your mind goes, your life follows. If you are in your 50s, probably if God is good to you, life is kind to you, you have another 50 years. But for your children, our children and our teenagers, the question is they have a whole lifespan ahead of them. And if we're not careful, we're going to create a situation where we're no longer there. They're living with a lot of regrets. Our thoughts can improve our peace, our health, our vision, our fitness, our strength, and so much more. Thoughts create your mood and influence how you feel physically. That's why we're talking about social media this evening. Okay, now, what is well-being? And I'll just talk about well-being, I'll leave mental health. Now, the state of being comfortable, healthy, and happy. That's well-being. And together with our mental health, defined by WHO, helps to define how we handle stress, how we relate to others, and how we make healthy choices. How we handle stress, how we relate to others, and how we make healthy choices. Okay, so something happened in 2019, and we all know what happened. COVID, or COVID-19. Today we live in the post-COVID era, and that's why we're talking about social media. So what happened? So schools had to, particularly the schools, the private schools, they felt the children were staying at home for too long. Learning was not taking place. It was going to create a problem later on when schools were open. And so because of that, they had to create online platforms. What we're doing today is a benefit of COVID, an online platform. So I can be far away and you can be wherever you are in any part of the world, and you can be listening to me and we can have several meetings. The truth of the matter is that it has helped connect the world and bring us together into one space. But at the same time, it has opened up what you would refer to as a Pandora's box, so that people are now exposed to things that ordinarily they were not exposed to. What is social media? That's digital technology that facilitates the sharing of texts, multimedia through virtual networks and
Okay, I think he's having issues with his network. Hopefully he reconnects. All right, thank you so much for being here with us. Hopefully he reconnects very soon.
Okay, can anyone hear me?
Yes, sir, we can hear you now, sir.
Oh, okay. Sorry that I just thought at some point I was talking to myself. Okay, so I said there are four personality types on social media. There are leaders, content creators who broadcast their opinions, whether they are good or bad, and they have power to influence others. Then there are likers, okay, those who share, those who comment, and those who engage with the content. And then there are lurkers, those who observe and consume. And then there are loners, those who refuse to have social media accounts. And I mean, I, by the grace of God, co-pastor a church where we have a lot of elderly people. And you post something on the WhatsApp platform, they tell you, I didn't see it. Send me a traditional text message. So those are loners. Now, I'm going to, before I talk about adolescents, let's quickly look at social media parenting, because we can't talk about our children without first looking through the mirror of ourselves. And I have 5 points here: parental distraction, decreasing level of everyday parental engagement, decreasing quality of parent-child interaction, decreased attachment and children, making a child more likely to be at risk for injury, for drug abuse, for being neglected. You may not pick up signs that you ought to pick up at the right time. Okay? Now, who are social media parents? And let's look at this quickly. We pause. Is this worthy of Facebook? Let me describe what I mean. So you wear a new dress and you want it to look, you're asking yourself, the first thing you look at yourself in the mirror, and the first question that runs through your mind is this worthy of Facebook? You take a picture of your child. Some women take a picture at pregnancy. So a child unborn is already exposed to social media even before he was born. And they trace the growth of that child without his consent or her consent all through life. What are we trying to do? Point number 2, comparison. We compare, achieving milestones. My child's been accepted. Oh, to God be the glory. matriculation done and dusted. University, whatever university, so that I don't call a particular name. And somebody else is there saying, my child is the same age with his own. How come mine is not in the university? Then you come back home and begin to pressure that child. Then you come back home and begin to give the child silent treatment. Then you come back home and begin to deny that child emotional involvement, because suddenly that child has made you to underachieve. One of the speakers says, the first speaker says, do not live your life through your children. Suddenly, why is it that the other children were able to, look at the previous example, look at something that happened in recent times on social media, the popular Midsummer story. And everybody had taken sides. And suddenly, people who were supposed to be parents were beginning to say, no, we will not allow her to write exam for the next 3 years. She's banned. Nobody is asking the question, how did we get here? Why is it that suddenly a girl scores the highest mark and she's all over social media, and another girl, young teenager, says, I want to be on social media also. And the only way to do it is to find a way to also insist that I have the same, in fact, I have a higher mark than that one. And then there was a lot of back and forth, and our ethnicity and our religiosity began to show up, and our, I would say, immaturity began to show up. And parents just dive inside that space, and everybody is beginning to talk, and nobody is saying, hold on a minute. Something is wrong in our society. That's an example. We overshare. Pepper them timelines with photos and updates. We commit our time. How much time do you spend as screen time? I'm talking to parents. We create, now by all of this, we create fame-hungry children. We brag too much. We force a picture-perfect moment. We create a digital footprint. Those things don't go away. They're always there. So you're creating a digital footprint. And then we focus on likes. Let me go and check. How many likes have I got? How many people will like me? People like photos and they don't want to read. You know, somebody said to me, you're writing too much. People are not going to read it. You better put picture. So the upside of social media, it keeps far away loved ones on the loop. You are able to learn just like we all are learning from each other, other parents. We commiserate, we can laugh, we can connect with others, we can find valuable resources. Now, even as kids reach adolescence, they need more than ever for us to watch over them. Adolescence is not about letting go. It's about hanging on during, take note, a very bumpy ride. It's about hanging on during a very bumpy ride, and adolescence can be very bumpy. Now I'm going to come to the mental aspect of this, but I'm going to start with this slide. 2019, by age group, look at suicide.
Please, sir, share your screen. We can't see your screen, sir. Please share, sir. Yes, sir, you're not sharing. Please share, sir. Thank you.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so can you see my screen now?
Yes, sir.
So I was saying that we look at suicide rates quickly. As of 2019, the part in purple there is low and medium income countries and falls into. The one in blue is high income countries, and that's suicide rates. age 5, age 10, age 15, So you find out that by age 15, it peaks, 20, 25, 30, and then it begins to drop after 35. That tells us something. That's our most productive age group, and we're losing them to suicide. And I'll explain why I put this up. Poverty and mental health is a vicious cycle. Poor parenting, harsh punishment and neglect, leading to poor educational attainment, school failure, domestic and interpersonal violence, reduced livelihoods, mental health conditions, alcohol and drug.
It's you.
Sorry, somebody saying something. Okay, risk-taking behaviors, including self-harm. Then we find that 66 million women in sub-Saharan Africa suffer from depression. 85% have no access to effective treatment. Women and young people are more left behind because 1 in 5 adolescents experience mental health issues, but they have poor access, the poorest healthcare access. Now look at this picture up here. What does that tell us? You see that you have 2 of the pictures, the one right on top and then the one below, one of the ones below are selfies. And then the other one, you have those young people gathered together and they've just taken a picture. This just gives you an idea of the difference in time and the difference in generation. So very quickly today, our young people want to take selfies. And it's all because of social media. Now quickly, I'm going to now look at the effects of social media on mental health. And I'm going to share that quickly from here. All right. Okay. So can you see the screen with Nelson Mandela on it now?
Yes, sir.
Yes, we can.
Okay, education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world, says Nelson Mandela. And what's the purpose of education? The function of education is to teach one to think intensively and to think critically. And every youth, every child has a work to do for the honor of God and humanity. Why am I saying that? The reason is simple. Because we want to look at how the minds of a child is affected by images, by words, by moving pictures. How does it affect students? How they think, how they act, and how they feel. I'm going very quickly because of our time. My eyes on the clock. We've talked about the generations, and I'm not going to go back there. The Alpha generation, the Gen Z, the Gen Y, the Gen X, the Boomers, and those who are silent. And then we'll look at, this is workplace characteristics by generation. I will share this later. Now, pay attention to this. Contact time on social media. During COVID and after COVID, 48% was spent in school. 42% with media and friends. Look at that. Church, 2%. Parents, 8%. That should worry anybody. Church, 2%. Parents, 8%. Majority of it is spent on school during COVID and after COVID when they were doing digital classes and with media and friends. Now, understanding the effect of digital devices, especially after COVID-19 lockdown. Too much dopamine. Dopamine is a chemical neurotransmitter associated with feelings of pleasure and reward. If we keep up the pattern of excessive screen time of hours every day over weeks and months, the brain's set point for pleasure changes. So anxiety, irritability, insomnia, dysphoria, mental preoccupation with using, otherwise known as craving. Now, when you hear the word craving, what happens to you? You remember drugs, you remember substances. It's the same thing that social media is doing. That's why we're talking. So some people are saying, well, my child doesn't use drugs, but he's on his phone. They're creating, it's creating the same problems. So yet, despite increased access to all of these feel-good drugs, we are more miserable. So we look at social media as feel-good drugs. We are more Can I go on?
Please go on, sir.
So despite increased access to all these feel-good drugs, we are more miserable than ever. Rates of depression, anxiety, physical pain, and suicide are increasing all over the world. Okay, dopamine and digital addiction. And this is an article in the New York Post. We now know that these iPads, smartphones, Xboxes are a form of digital drug. Recent brain imaging research is showing that they affect the brain's frontal cortex, and it controls executive functioning, including impulse control, in exactly the same way that cocaine does. Technology is so hyper arousing, it raises dopamine levels, the feel-good neurotransmitter most involved in addiction dynamics. Now, social media offers us the promise of connectivity. And adults have allowed the dismantling of a secure base of attachment. The need for connection, support, nurturing remains unfulfilled, resulting in a mental, emotional, and spiritual health crisis. What are the technological trends and statistics? 1 in 3 children uses the internet under 18 years of age. Globally, more devices are how children are most commonly accessing the internet. Smartphone ownership and use has become a central part of teen life across gender, ethnicity, and socioeconomic backgrounds. Let me share the implication of this for us. So your children are communicating with people that they've never seen before. Gone are the days when a child comes home and you say, who is your father and who is your mother? What do they do? Where do they live? I want to pay them a visit. I want to be able to understand who they are, where they live, how they think. Your children have friends that you don't even know. When a lot of us were growing up, we had pen pals while we were in secondary school. It took us so long to write a letter to a pen pal that by the time you left secondary school, you just told yourself, what nonsense? Why am I bothering my head about this thing? It takes 3 months for the letter to come back, then 3 months for it to go. Cancel this thing and forget it. You don't have to wait 3 months anymore. It's 3 seconds, and they're connecting with somebody that you are not aware of. That's the impact of social media. 95% of teens report to owning a smartphone or have access to one. Additionally, 45% of teens report they are online on a near constant basis. Check, when they are not online, their body is shaking. It's like they've taken a substance. I need to be online. I need to find out. I need to check some things. I need to, that dopamine level, and they're exhibiting symptoms of withdrawal. Almost half, 49%, of 0 to 2-year-olds interact with smartphones. Once they are running around and they're disturbing the mother, take this phone so that you can give me 5 seconds of peace. They're interacting with me with smartphones. And go and check. They will open the phone and begin. My wife was telling me this evening that somebody was calling her during the week, was flashing her. It was the lady's son. He's about 3 years old. He was flashing all the people on her phone. He called flash and cut. Flash and cut. Then he will move to the next contact. flash and cut, and move to the next contact, flash and cut. He was having fun. Gen Z averages around 9 hours of screen time per day. What is the damaging side effect? Sleep deprivation. Blue light interferes, and I mentioned, you saw the slide on blue light earlier on. I left it till this point. Blue light interferes with melatonin production and disrupts the body's circadian rhythm. Circadian rhythm is your sleep-wake pattern. So there's sleep deprivation, there's obesity, there's susceptibility to type 2 diabetes, and then there is delayed learning. Young children who watch excessive amounts of TV or screen can experience difficulties in concentration. You are actually training the brain to follow moving objects so that when he's in class, he doesn't pay attention. If the thing is not moving, doesn't catch his attention. So avoidance of compulsive checking can be harmful to our productivity. Of us who are parents. You are in the office where they say you must be there from 8 to 5 p.m. You only have a break at 12 to 1. You know, once you are behind your computer, the next thing you have, there's this compulsion to pick up your phone and check something. Somebody called me last night, a call at around 11 p.m. I didn't see it until 4 a.m. when I woke up. And then I returned the call. And she said, I called you last night. I said, I'm sorry. My phone does not stay with me in the bedroom. My phone is in the study while I'm in the bedroom. When I come into the study, my phone is in the bedroom while I'm in the study. Yeah, so I just ensure that the phone is not there. And when we come to adolescents, I can see that the time is ticking, so I'm going to be a little faster. I'll explain a few things to us here. It takes an average of 23 minutes and 15 seconds to get back to deep focus that you had on a task once you have been distracted. So think about it. Once you are distracted, it takes 23 minutes and 15 seconds to go back. Even brief mental blocks can cause you to lose as much as 40% of your productive time. If you think most of the time you spend on your phone is done doing productive activities, studies prove otherwise. What's the effect of social media? There are a few videos that I will send around later on. Example of digital dangers. TikTok helps children find videos on self-harming. David Folaomi talked about self-harming. TikTok helps children find videos on self-harming and anorexia. Now, adolescents already, if you're not careful, have a problem with body image. I'm too fat. I'm too thin. Okay, because I'm too fat, I need to stop eating so that my friends who shame me bodily, I can now belong, because beauty is about being slim and prim and proper. They find all this on TikTok. Do your kids have strategies to seek help and who they can turn to talk about it? And I think this has come up again and again and again. And the best friend that a child should have is their parents. Okay, so that's the dark side of social media. Millennials are the most anxious generation. Stress among young people is highest in 80 years. Teenagers are in a depression epidemic. Depression raised with 70% over the last 25 years. Eating disorders have doubled in the last 7 years. And these are the mental disorders that follow the use of social media. Attention deficit and hyperactivity, depression, narcissism, body dysmorphia, hypochondriasis, anxiety, voyeurism, obsessive compulsive disorder, schizophrenia, addiction. Let me just share a quick story about social media for us as I try to wrap up. A few weeks ago, my wife teaches in a secondary school, and she said to me, something happened. A girl took a picture of herself naked and kept it on her phone. You know, my antenna went up quickly, and I said to myself, I've been in this my body for the past 53 years. I will not stand naked in front of a mirror. I won't. I mean, I just wonder, what exactly am I doing? So she stands and takes a picture of herself naked. And suddenly, it was like the picture went viral. How? There is an app on the phone that if you scan on top of somebody's phone without the person knowing, just the person holds the phone in his hand and you do a scan, it just copies the picture. The pictures, all the pictures on the phone, but it will put on red copy, like you have sample on top of it. And they can access those pictures and spread it around. This is a girl who is in GSC. They're spreading it around the boys. Think about what would happen to her body image. Now, I'm going to come to that very quickly now, but a few years ago, when they said children were doing that with Snapchat, I just went to my parental control app and locked down all the Snapchat on my children's phones. And one of my children came back to say, I cannot access Snapchat. I said, yes, I locked it down. And this is the reason why I locked it down. And she said, no, we're not stupid now. We will not do that kind of a thing. I said, yes, you won't do it, but it will find its way to your phone. And I don't want you to have access to it on any other person's phone. Then we have to sit down and really take time. So it's important. Now, the stressors relating to social media, online harassment, cyberbullying, and that's something that a lot of parents are not even aware.
So let's enjoy it. You sure this is not important?
Okay. The following examples fall under category of cyberbullying: hurtful text, spreading rumors online, making fun of others, creating fake profiles to make fun of others, posting and distributing private photos, recording and posting fight videos, copying personal information and identity theft, humiliating others, photoshopping pictures to make others look bad, trash talking someone on an online game. And all this is happening. And look at that. This is what it looks like when there's cyberbullying. And you are not even aware that that child is going through it. You're not paying attention. You are also on your own phone doing your own thing, that you do not see that your child's behavior, your child's emotions have changed. Let me share something personal with you. One of my children was in primary 3, yes. And we were going to school, and I just looked back that day, and she was crying. And I parked the car. And I began to talk to her. What is happening in school? What exactly is going on? You don't want to go to school? She said yes. You want to go back home? She said yes. Okay, I'll drop your sister, and then we'll go back home. Then we can talk about it. So I dropped her sister and drove back home. When we got home, I said, now we're at home. You're not going to school today. So tell me what's happening in school. And then she said to me, it's my class teacher. She's always picking on me. She's always making me look bad. She's always rating me with my older sister. And that's the person that teaches her arithmetic. Parents, fast forward to 15 years. Okay, maybe, no, not 15, maybe 13 years later. She's writing GCE. She's still struggling with maths. I had to get a private teacher to teach. That's how damaging bullying can be. That was not cyberbullying, it was physical. This is worse because it's in their face every day. So 40% have been harassed online. 73% have witnessed harassment. 100% of the time, it is worse than you imagine. If you are a female, if you are LGBTQ, if you are a person of color. And the same thing applies if you are normal, if you are not LGBTQ. Now we're finding that there's a lot of bullying that goes on. Once you express yourself and you say, I don't support this, there's a lot of bullying that goes on. What's the consequences? Loss of self-confidence, depression, social and emotional withdrawal, school absence, drop in academic performance, self-harm, suicidal ideas, attempts, and acts. Okay, so, and then you have pornography, and I'm going to just show you what your brain looks like with pornography. Now, here's your normal brain. Here's your brain on heroin. Here's your brain on pornography. Now you can see what pornography does to the brain. And the access is more now with social media. Then you have gaming. What are the behavioral indicators? quickly. What are the indicators I should look for in my child? Declining interest in school performance, loss of interest in other activities, being rebellious, being aggressive, being irritable or easily triggered, episodes of excessive anger and rage, defiance of authoritarian figures, trouble sleeping, insomnia, does not see gaming as a problem. What are the psychological indicators? Mood shift, being cranky. Usually when playing games, they're more relaxed. Problems with body image, depression, preoccupation with video games, active and passive gaming, anxiety, attention deficit and hyperactivity, unable to process emotions or emotionally numb and hedonia. Problems with interpreting emotional and nonverbal cues. What are the academic indicators? Watch this. Mathematics marks dropping. Problems with reading. Problems with language and comprehension. Task sequencing. Problems with focus and concentration on a specific task. Unwillingness to complete tasks or persist, and they quit tasks easily. Okay, so these are the behavioral indicators. We've gone through that. I'm going to now race to what you can do. What can you do? Relational signs. Quickly, isolation and conflict with others, particularly with family and peers. Now, what can you do? All these are videos. I'll send them over later. Good. I'm going to focus on parental controls, privacy settings, location of phones, and then have the talk. Streamline guidance for parents. Busy parents, you must have common sense social media. You must help people to protect their eyes. Now, look at these apps. Life 360. What's that app now? Okay. Parental control, something like that. It's on my phone, and all my 4 children are on that phone. It's the best free parental control. Google Family Link, and it's there below. Family Link. You have it for both Android and for iPhones. What does that do? All your children's devices are on that phone through Google. And what that helps you do is 2 things. You can access how much screen time they are spending on different apps. You can also control the age-related content of the apps. Then Life 360 helps in locating your child. So as long as that child has that device, you can locate. Now, let me tell you the truth. There's no foolproof method. I've had situations where a child created a different Google Gmail account so that that phone was no longer reading on the parent's phone, so that that child now had complete access to all kinds of things. The beauty of Family Link is that I can be in Europe. As long as that child is online, I can lock down his screen time from Europe. So suddenly the phone goes dead. I can set limits, bedtime. By 8 o'clock, the phone will lock. So when they have assignments from school, they come to me to say, can I have my phone? I need to have it now because it will lock by 8 o'clock. And once it locks, nobody's going to open that phone for you. In fact, I had to go to their school to say to them, when they resume school, I seize the devices. They have no device during school time. So I don't understand why you want to give them assignment on WhatsApp. I'm not going to allow that to happen. So when the children come and say, they gave us assignment in school, I said, that's what happened. Go back and tell your teacher that your father said, I'm not giving you that phone. We have agreed as PTA that it will not happen during school time. Let them go and do their work. COVID has ended. Let's end this thing. When they're on holidays and they have access to it, even then, it opens at 10 and it locks within a particular time. And they know I'm constantly checking. They have done 2 hours on this one. I lock it down from wherever I am. That's the benefit of Family Link. But most importantly is to sit with your children and speak to them. And I'll close with this evening. We had a conversation one day. We were going to school and my children said to me, I can't remember what it was, but I said, this is my opinion. And they said, no, we read online that it's not like that. So I said, okay, that's good. Where did you read it online? And we went and checked. And I said, this is a private site. This person is airing his private views. Those views have not been scientifically proven. And the internet is a big place. Anybody, permit the use of my language, any idiot can put anything there. And if you want to believe it, then it begins to affect your mind. So after we had that conversation, I now had to teach them that .org is an organization. Chances are high that organizations want to keep their integrity. .edu is a university, and you need to go back and check that that university is not just one 3-bedroom flat in the middle of nowhere that is spewing out information that cannot be verified. You have to look through all of this and then teach them how to find things. Fast forward. My oldest daughter, who's 20, sends me a message. I want to join LinkedIn because I find out that I can find researches. So she couldn't get onto LinkedIn and said to me, when I come home, you will help me do it. That's the effect of conversation. But then I have joined academia.edu. Now I am also on academia.edu. And then she sent me a message. Did you write anything on drug abuse? Did you write any paper on drug abuse? And I said, yes, why? She said, I just read your paper. That's a 300 level student. She's using social media to her advantage because somebody has sat down to explain it. When I said to her, won't you join Facebook? She said, for what? So that people will be putting unnecessary pressure on me. I don't want. She's not joined. So parents out there, I'm saying to you, and I close with this, there's God on our side, and he has a good plan for our children. But he also wants us, he also expects us to be well-trained, well-informed, which is why all of this talk is taking place. I have tried under the constraints of time to really say as much as possible, but I hope that I have stimulated your interest in going to first do a check on yourself. Am I a social media freak? Can I control myself? I need to now check what contents I am going through. I need to stop this craze to post and then sit with your children and have those conversations with them. Thank you very much, and God bless you.
Well, thank you so much, sir. So much value gotten. I don't know about you, but for me, so much. I just glued and I listened. Wow. Thank you once again. We've had it all. Everything is not about social media. Social media also does not forget. So we need to educate our children. Why are you there as a parent? And then why does your children need to be on the social media? My 10 years, my 11, oh, sorry, he's 12 now. Told me something, told me, Mom, please stop posting my pictures on social media. I will post them on my own terms. That was when I stopped posting birthday. I just post on my status and that's all. I don't take to Facebook, Instagram anymore. If at 10, 11, he could tell me that, then I knew I needed to stop. So these are conversations we should be having with our children. Thank you so much for being here up till now. I know we've eaten into your time and I know tomorrow is work. But this won't be complete without we taking questions. So if you have a question, please raise up your hand. And any speaker who is still around will take your answer. I know the Reverend Doctor is still here. I don't know if Dr. Chika and Uncle David is still here, but please raise up your hand if you have a question to ask, and we take it quickly before we take our closing prayer and go. Please, any question, put your hand up, or any contribution, something you think we need to hear before we go. Okay, so I want to assume the silence means we have no questions and we understood everything. I don't know if David Follerman is still here. I don't think he's here. I think he has gone. I think he has gone. All right, once again, thank you everybody for coming. Since we have no questions, I'm still checking our chat to see if we have any questions. Please, if you have questions, ask. So we take the next 5 minutes to answer our questions. Okay, all I'm saying is thank you. Wonderful. Okay, all right. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you once again for being here with us. All right, let me see what this is. Okay, thank you very much, sir. Okay. Thank you so much, sir. God bless you and increase you more, sir. All right, so we have no questions, and I think it's a good time to close. Great, Adesanya, you're muted. Do you want to ask a question? Or you have a contribution to make? Okay, she says no. Okay, please, the contact for the first speaker, please. Okay, the contact will be posted on the WhatsApp group. The contact will be posted on the WhatsApp group. And then I can only send the address of her clinic, which is the only thing she gave me. But if she gives me permission to post her number, I sure will. But for now, all she gave me is the contact of her hospital. All right, so in closing, I want to call on Mrs. Kemi Onoja to take the closing remark and the closing prayer. Sorry, Matt, I'm just putting you on the spot. But please take the closing remarks and the closing prayer. Thank you so much, ma'am.
I did tell an hour for you.
I just put you on the spot. It was your name I just liked to call. Thank you.
Okay. Well, we want to thank all the speakers for their time, the effort, the seeds that they have sown. We want to assure you that, and we pray that all the seeds of information and the seeds of your time you have spent to give us knowledge, to share with us in the little time as much as you could, they will blossom and they will be fruitful in the name of Jesus. We pray that the Lord will continue to replenish, to give you the wisdom, the grace, the strength to do this work, because it's a lot of work. Parenting in this age, a lot of work to do that work that He has said before you. This prayer is for the speakers and for every parent or guardian that is represented here. We ask that we ask the Holy Spirit to continually be a guide, because there's so much we can do. At the end of the day, it is by His mercies and His grace. So we pray for the mercy and the grace of God to continue to follow our children, even in this day and age, that which we teach, that the seeds that we plant, that they grow and become fruitful in Jesus' name. We pray for the guardianship of the Holy Spirit and His angels to be with them even as they grow up, that they grow up to be lions, they grow up to be salt of the earth, they grow up to be yeast, that they will affect their generation positively. Thank you so much. God bless you. May the Lord bless all of us. May the Lord keep us, and may He cause His face to shine upon us. And may He be gracious unto us and grant us His peace in Jesus' name. Thank you so much. Thanks so much.
Amen. Once again, thank you everyone for coming. Thank you for your patience, for staying to the end. Have a wonderful and a fulfilling week ahead. Bye-bye.
Right.